welcome back. So I decided to create a separate little video, and I'm going to tag it to all of my little playlists, but it's called Note Types. Which one do I use? So this is a question that I see all the time on Reddit and in different forums and social media posts about zettelkasten. There's so many different terms that are thrown out there about the different types of cards that people can use that it's really making it confusing for people to understand what each card type is, when to use them, and even how they all integrate in your actual day-to-day practice of using zettelkasten. So I thought I'd go ahead and make this video. It's a little bit longer because I wanted to make sure I provided enough detail and some real-world examples of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we are, note types. Which one do I use? So the first type of note that I've run into is one called fleeting notes. Now this came from Aaron's and his book, How to Take Smart Notes. And fleeting notes are reminders of information that can be written in any kind of way and will end up in the trash within a day or two. And this is true, right? I go through Post-it notes like there's no tomorrow. Quick little note about something I need to do. I scribble it on a Post-it note, stick it on my monitor, and I'm ready to go. Kids come in, hey mom, I need this. I'm not gonna get up and go put it on the board in the kitchen where we write down all of our lists. I'll tell them to do it, but they're teenagers, right? So I also put it on a Post-it note. I have trained myself to use Post-it notes as fleeting notes because one, they never seem to stick wherever I put them for very long, and two, they're real easy and small and can get thrown away, and I don't have any thoughts about it. If it's on a Post-it note, it's really not that important in the long term. Okay. The second type of note that Aaron's talks about are permanent notes. He says these will never get thrown away and they contain the necessary information in a permanently understandable way. All right, I have the problem with the concept of calling anything permanent because life changes, life evolves. I mean, even Nicholas Luhmann opted to recreate his zettelkasten a couple of times because it wasn't working for him. I mean, did he keep every single note he ever wrote? I don't know. I mean, the sense of permanence to me is just too concrete. I think that for your zettelkasten to be effective, it has to be flexible. And over time, I can see not needing something if it becomes part of the everyday vernacular that somebody uses that I wasn't sure what it meant when it first got talked about. You know, the example being artificial intelligence. Sure, I have it defined right now in a lot of different ways. Am I going to need to keep those notes forever? I don't know. I might not. The third type of notes he talks about are project notes, notes that are only relevant to one particular project and can be discarded or archived after the project is finished. Okay, this is confusing. So now we've got fleeting notes, which I get, right? They're Post-it notes, they're disposable. But then you have permanent notes and project notes. Now, if I used my notes, my permanent notes, to create a written project, I would want to keep the cards that I used to create that project in the event that my work was ever questioned. Did I plagiarize? Did I use an LLM to write that paper? Whatever the case may be, your cards in your zettelkasten system, if you use them on a project, in my opinion, you best keep those cards because that is your proof of your original thoughts, your original works, and what they're based on. I would not consider project notes to be something that you could discard. Now, there is, as always, an exception to the rule. When I create my project tabs and I start throwing cards in because I've had a neural explosion or a spark of inspiration, I will draft a really quick card trying to capture what it is that I am so excited about, that I absolutely want to dig into more and learn more about. That little cheat card that reminds me of why all of these different puzzle pieces come together for a bigger picture, that is the one card I would not have a problem deleting after I finished the project. Why? Because that inspiration for that project, I would assume, is going to be incorporated in that final project in a way that you don't need it as your additional support. But again, that's just me. Now, I get that Aaron's is trying to help people, particularly students, to write better notes. But I think his approach is making it very confusing for those that want to follow the zettelkasten method digitally or analogy. I've heard the term atomic notes used a lot in social media, Reddit, different accounts where people talk about their atomic notes. And I tried to do some research. Where did this concept of atomic notes come from? And to be honest, I couldn't even find who first used the phrasing atomic notes. So basically, the concept of atomic notes has been popularized by the digital movement. It's a fairly recent terminology to come into play within the zettelkasten concept. The best definition I could find was that they're small, interconnected notes, and that it's all about breaking down information into the smallest, most self-contained unit or atom of knowledge. Okay, I have a whole host of problems with this. Especially the limiting terminology of small, atom, atomic. You know, I think that your notes need to be concise and need to be contained and need to make sense. I don't think that necessarily means small or atomic in nature. I have limits on my notes, and that's because I'm using a digital tool, but I'm following an analog process. And I determined that 4x6-inch cards can hold roughly 250 words of text written in a Times New Roman font at, I think it was 10-point size, or maybe even 12. I'm not sure. I'd have to look in my notes again. But the point is, I set a limit, 275 words. I try to stay within that limit on my main cards or my zettelkasten cards. I don't necessarily stay in that limit if it's a theory, because I don't want to make those confusing, and I won't stay in that limit on my index because my index becomes just kind of a long list of alphabetical words. In order to keep things simple, I think the best approach is to use the cards and the way they're laid out as described by Scott Sherper in Anti-Net Zettelkasten. I have found that it's logical, it makes sense, it's based on principles that Niklas Luhmann used himself to be such a prolific author and publisher, and it's just simple. You don't have to worry about all these just different terminologies and fleeting and atomic and permanent and temporary. It's just very logically laid out. So the first card or type of note is your index card. It's an alphabetical listing of keywords. If more than 3 cards refer to the same keyword, Scott recommends that you give it its own card if you want. So using the example that I have on the screen here, you can see artificial intelligence frameworks. I have 3 cards. As soon as I add a 4th card, that is when I will most likely create a separate card for frameworks and go ahead and list them all there and get them off the index just to keep it neat and clean. The next card is the bibliography or bib card. This is the card that I consider to be foundational to everything within my zettelkasten. I have the author details, I have a reference, an in-text reference, and the complete reference for my bibliography or biography. I have a description letting me know what it's talking about. I have an overview of some important key points, and then I have my key takeaways, which are the things that I ultimately turn into main cards or term, concept, and theory cards, so that my knowledge is built out in a way that's easy to use. Bibliography cards, they're probably permanent cards. I can't understand why somebody would want to get rid of a bibliography card. It's also going to be a project card. If I'm working on a project and I am citing information from this particular author, I'm going to want to keep that bibliography card with the project, and ultimately I'm going to want to file it so that I have access to it in the event that somebody questions the use of that information or the genesis of a specific quote. The next card is the terms, concepts, and theories cards. These are also referred to commonly as the vocab cards. So terms, concepts, and theories cards or vocab cards, they can be used to define words, like what's an application bias, right? I'm defining a very specific word there. It can explain important concepts, like what is a diamond model? So it doesn't have to be a specific word. It can explain a larger concept. It can discuss complex and simple theories. So here's the theory of fusionism that I found in an article that was written by Fonte. And so I use that box as a way of capturing things that I don't necessarily want to address or tie to a specific academic discipline, because it can apply, I have found, across so many different things, and ultimately results in a lot of my different sparks of inspiration and neural explosions. Next are the zettelkasten or main cards. I think that this is what Ahrens was referring to when he talked about permanent cards. This is what captures your knowledge. It's used for some objective or project, even if it's just to further your own intellectual collection of ideas and things to talk about with people. The main thing about these cards is that they're written in your thoughts, your words, your opinions. It's not like knowledge management where it's just the capturing of notes, right? We're not just taking the notes from somebody else and copying it down verbatim. We're actually processing the information that we're learning, and we're creating cards based on what that information is so that we can access it at some later point to complete a project or to answer a question, whatever our objective is. It doesn't necessarily have to be to write articles or to write books or to get published. That just happens to be what a lot of us like to do with this information, but that's not the only reason to collect it. So what's it look like day to day in my real life, right? I don't stick to just one thing. I love the chronodex. That's this 24-hour clock here. I color mine in every day with my schedule. I know if something's in a nice bright color that it was scheduled in advance, and then throughout the day as meetings get added to my calendar, usually the same day, I will fill those in with just a regular pen that I use so that I can see what was a last minute meeting versus what was scheduled in advance. There's my Post-it notes. I probably go through almost a stack of Post-it notes, meaning one color, not, all 5 colors in a day. I write a lot of Post-it notes because I just don't have the mental acuity to keep track of all these little things. And at the end of the day, I go through the stack and I make sure I took care of them and I throw them away. I prefer to not have Post-it notes sitting around day after day. And so for me, they really are things that I have to take care of within a 24-hour period. And then I have spirals and notebooks that I like to use to keep track of things, questions, stuff that I want to work on that I do not put into my zettelkasten. Now, I know some people do like to put different cards in for what they're doing or what projects or what ideas they have. That's where I'm capturing things in my little spiral notebooks or daily journals. It just depends on what I have, what I can grab, what I've ordered. You know, I usually buy these in bulk when I can get a deal on them. Anything that's pertaining to my research, my dissertation, the articles I write, or the books I am writing goes into my zettelkasten. It doesn't matter to me where it comes from. If I'm listening to a podcast and suddenly I hear something that resonates deeply with me that I think I'm going to want to use at some point in the future, I will pause that podcast and put whatever it is that I thought about on my zettelkasten and file it, or add it to my stack of cards to file after I've indexed it, you know, later on. I basically live with these 4 tools day in and day out. And so that's how I make it all work for me. And just because it's kind of hard to see, I just thought I'd give an example. So here is a little spiral notebook that actually it's a stitched notebook that I have that I write notes in from time to time and throughout the day. I do also use sometimes as a temporary post-it note this little whiteboard. I can really quickly and easily write something on it in a dry erase marker and then erase it obviously with a cloth as soon as I'm done. I generally will use that for the first maybe hour or so of the day, and then it runs out of room and I'm not ready to erase anything, so then I have to switch to my post-it notes. I just find that this is what works for me. I think that there's a lot of confusion out there, but if you follow a very logical process of having an index, using a bibliography, having your terms, concepts, and theories or vocab in a separate area, and then your main or zettelkasten cards. Now, that's not to say that I don't have projects. I do. I have a project box, and inside that project box, I have a tab with the name of that project, whatever it is. I have a short summary card that explains all the different puzzle pieces that I just threw together in there and what they have to do with one another and what I want to write about. And then when I'm done, I refile all of that. I think it's important to keep it just as proof of my original ideas opposed to using a large language model. I hope that this helps clarify the mud a little bit on the different types of cards. I hope it helps you understand which ones you should use. I hope you understand that you have the freedom to do what works best for you on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, I'm doing a mix of bullet journaling, post-it notes, spiral and bound books with, you know, questions and things I need to address. And then obviously my zettelkasten, which is the foundation to all of my future projects. If you have any questions or concerns, please put them in the comments below. I will try to personally answer them either in another video or to you directly, or maybe even in an article that I publish on my website. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.